What is up, you guys? So I know I really fell behind with my Supercross recaps, and just basically because of laziness and, of course, life getting in the way. So I'm going to do this lone video to catch up with the races that I missed so far. I didn't do one for Nashville and obviously things got really hectic for me, and I just got a little too lazy trying to detox after everything. So that's kind of where I've been. I know I also have my recap of the final softball season in the Big West, their final homestand against Cal Poly, which they ended up sweeping, and they ended up sweeping Riverside on the road in their season finale. And unfortunately, their season came to an end against Santa Barbara in the semifinals of the Big West tournament, but still, softball had a really memorable season, to say the least. Second place overall in the final standings. I'm going to say that right now. I'm going to talk about that in another video, but I'm going to talk about the Supercross season that just came to an end this past Saturday night. Unfortunately, I had to miss that one because I was away at another volleyball tournament, and of course, I ended up riding on 4 championship matchups. And I'm obviously on a different computer because my laptop has got some crackling speakers right now. But in the meantime, let's get into this. I'm going to start with the 250 class this time. Haiden Deegan, Cole Davies, your champs. Disappointed for Pro Circuit Kawasaki. Now, I got to say this. The way that Yamaha rode, the star Yamaha team with Haiden Deegan and Cole Davies, they definitely proved that they were the cream of the crop in the 250 class. And, this kind of reminds me a little bit of 2003 Motocross when it was Carmichael and Wyndham who were dominating the overalls, and they only lost one moto between the two in that season, and that was to Tim Ferry in the first moto at Budds Creek. And, of course, Ferry was on factory Yamaha at the time. And to say the least, Seth Hamaker in this case was Tim Ferry, where he won the Daytona Supercross for Pro Circuit Kawasaki. And I thought from that point on that Seth was going to hit his stride, and unfortunately it didn't happen. And before the end of the season in 2025, I had called Seth Hamaker as the champion for whatever coast he was running, and unfortunately that didn't happen. I really thought that Seth came into his own, but he made a lot more mistakes in his second year, not like a guy who got spoiled in his first year, because Hamaker was good in 2025, but he wasn't very consistent enough to a point where he was consistently battling for wins. And Tom Vial really took advantage of it and ended up winning back-to-back titles in the 250 class. But for Vial to be passed up for a 450 ride is a big miscarriage of justice in the sport of motocross, for sure. And as a result, Tom Vial's back in Europe. But I look for Seth Hamaker to make some noise in motocross, and unfortunately he didn't do that at Salt Lake City. And to be frank, like I said before in a past video, I can already hear Pro Circuit Kawasaki crying foul, because when Hamaker got docked 2 spots at Philly, I thought that was another miscarriage of justice on the AMA's behalf. And I still believe that Mike Pelletier and all those other guys who are running the AMA had better be looking for new jobs at the end of this season. Because, really, they've made a lot of questionable calls, and the one thing that they did was victimize Seth Hamaker when they penalized Haiden Deegan over at, I think, Nashville, when it was a 250 showdown. And to be frank, I can't remember the last time that penalties really decided a title chase like what happened before, like what happened this season with Cole Davies essentially running away with the Eastern title. And to be honest, Seth still had a great season. I would have expected him to win another one by then. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. He's had some trouble as of late. But I really hope that he turns it around in outdoors, because last year after Supercross, we didn't hear much from Seth Hammaker after that. Hopefully that'll change in the outdoors this year. And to be frank, I think that Pro Circuit is really wetting their pants after what happened with Cameron McAdoo and Seth in the main event at Salt Lake City. Because to be frank, I really don't think that Cameron McAdoo has really delivered, because the fact that they let Ty Masterpool slip through their fingers, is why I think that they're wetting their pants at this point. Because if they kept Ty Masterpool, I guarantee you he may have been a consistent podium threat. And instead, he's back on the 450 on a privateer team, and now he's out until outdoors. Just kind of goes to show that logic in this sport is sure as hell not what it used to be. And obviously, second chances in this day and age are very much rare. And frankly, I do think that Ty deserves a second chance, especially after how last year went for him. But obviously, logic ain't what it used to be before. That's to say the least. But still, first and foremost, I want to congratulate Cole Davies on the championship. And he really earned it as well, because he really came into his own and proved that 2025 was no fluke. But what happened at Salt Lake City between him and Haiden Deegan, you could kind of call that retribution for sure, because when Deegan put Davies down at Denver, I thought that sooner or later, Haiden Deegan was going to get what was coming to him. Now, I don't dislike Deegan. I'm going to say that right now. I think he's a welcome addition to the sport. And personally, I thought in 2024, when he was kind of being a little brash, I thought, well, sooner or later, he's going to make a lot of enemies, and they're going to give him his just desserts. But he did a good job at avoiding all that for as long as he did. And to be frank, I kind of thought that Deegan was asking for trouble on one side of the coin, like at Millville last year, where he kind of blamed Chance Hymas or whatnot. And I thought, well, I could kind of see a lot of Jason Lawrence in him, but I could also see that he was a hard worker, unlike J-Law. And to be frank, at first I didn't really like it, because I do think that Deegan had to have been a lot more professional than that. But he really cleaned it up, and I couldn't be happier for him. But still, what happened with Deegan and Davies at Salt Lake City was, like I said, Deegan getting his just desserts, or a little bit of retribution on Cole Davies' behalf. Because, frankly, I was a little surprised that happened. But one thing that really took me by surprise is when Deegan went down the first time, and when he got up, he still had the power to clear the double that was directly in front of him. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, these bikes have come a long way. And to be frank, I was saying to myself, I'm still at a loss for words that he was able to clear that double. Because, really, you would think that after a crash that Deegan would go 1-1, but no, he still found the power to clear that double. And I was just as flabbergasted. So now Deegan's going to the 450 in motocross. And, of course, Jet Lawrence is coming back. So I hope that turns out to be a good battle. And frankly, I hope that this foot injury that Jet Lawrence went through is not the beginning of the end for him. Because we've seen it happen before where an injury kind of ruins the title chase and ruins some guys' careers. Just ask Damon Huffman and Ezra Lusk, because Huffman broke his leg or broke his foot after winning the Atlanta race in 97, and he was never the same guy after that. And Ezra Lusk injured his shoulder in the first practice session of the 2000 Supercross season, and Lusk wasn't really the same after that as well. So we'll see what happens in the outdoors. Now, my pick for the championship in the 250 class, I don't know. I kind of would have to go with Joe Shimoda, because I think he's got a lot to prove after missing most of the East Series because of what happened to him at Philly in the heat race, where his day and season were ultimately over. And frankly, I'm looking for Levi Kitchen to rebound after a subpar Supercross season. But honestly, I do think that if Levi Kitchen has another bad season outdoors, he's going to be shopping for a ride for next season, or maybe looking for looking for a new home. Because I think that Pro Circuit is getting sick and tired of coming up bust for a Supercross title and a Motocross title. And to be honest, I haven't seen this kind of luck from Mitch Payton in probably 20 years. Because really, he's got the talent, he's got the riders, but it seems like luck just never agrees with them. Just like what happened with Hammaker and Cameron McAdoo at Salt Lake City. So hopefully things will turn around eventually for Pro Circuit. And that's where I'll leave it as far as that's concerned. But hopefully Seth will turn some heads outdoors and he'll maybe make a run for the title. So now to the 450 class. Ken Roczen wins title. Suzuki's first since 2010. Jorge Prado affected title chase. I don't blame him. I'm going to get this out of the way. Jorge Prado, wow, what a ride. Because really, with the kind of luck that guy has had since missing some races earlier this season, holy smokes. I hadn't seen that kind of riding out of Prado since the opener. Chase Sexton won the race for the record, but for Jorge Prado to really come up on Hunter Lawrence like that, wow. That's the kind of riding from a guy who had nothing to lose, especially with the last round of the season coming up. To be honest, with Hunter Lawrence, I had him pegged for the Supercross title. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But I do think that Hunter was way, way, way too nice with Ken Roczen. Hunter Lawrence got the good start, but when Hunter got passed by Ken Roczen right away, that kind of ruined his race. And he was kind of tailing Roczen until he went down, and just like that, the title chase was over. Now, using the history of this sport, this kind of reminds me a little bit of the 125 title chase in 1998 in the West between John Dowd and David Villeman. I hope that David Villeman would win that championship in 1998. Unfortunately, he didn't get the best start, and then he ended up going down. And just like that, the title chase was effectively over. That start really affected Villeman, just like how Jorge Prado affected Hunter Lawrence. And frankly, going back a few rounds to Cooper Webb, talking a lot of crap about Jorge Prado, that's really unprofessional. For a three-time champ in Cooper Webb, I haven't seen that kind of asinine attitude in a number of years. Because, really, that is solid proof that you can dish it out, but you can't take it. And that's what Cooper Webb is proving right now. And frankly, I thought Cooper Webb was a lot better than that, but apparently I was wrong. Now, on one side of the coin, you can't really blame him for saying things like that, but especially when everyone knows that Webb's a lot better than that, and he should be beating Prado, and they're not wrong about that, but I saw nothing wrong with what Prado did there, and I saw nothing wrong with what Prado did at Salt Lake City. He was going for the position on Hunter Lawrence, just like he was trying to protect his position at Philly over Cooper Webb, and Webb went for an ill-advised pass. And for a three-time champ, no, you're proving you're a three-time winner, not a champ of individual races, not a three-time season champ. Okay? Now, I'm not going to take anything away from Webb. He's a good rider and all that. But when it comes to things like that, and when he's going to just kind of piss and moan about it, no. That's not the kind of attitude I'm going to support. Because, to be frank, that sounds more like a petulant kid who is happy when things go his way and throws a fit when things don't. Okay? That's where I'm going right now with Cooper Webb. But still, the one guy who had the lousiest day of all, Eli Tomac. Oh my God. I couldn't have been more disappointed in Eli Tomac than ever before, because although he had to miss a couple races because of a crash in practice, I think it was at Philly, then he came back for Denver and started putting in some decent rides. I kind of thought sooner or later that Tomac was going to have something bad happen to him again, and unfortunately it did. And his day was over after the first turn, just like with Joe Shimoda at Philly. But still, it was a good start to the season for Tomac, and it ended pretty horribly. But frankly, after what happened to Tomac the first time when he crashed in practice at Philly, I kind of thought that was going to define the back half of this season for him. And unfortunately, I was right. Because, to be frank, it looks like Tomac might be suffering the same kind of fate that Ken Roczen is going through. And for Roczen, I want to congratulate him on the championship. I was thinking Hunter Lawrence was going to get it, but then he had that bad crash in the Triple Crown in the final race, and that kind of ruined the back half of his season. Because I do think that Hunter was being too nice at Salt Lake City, and he also kind of got ruined a bit when Roczen passed him right away. And, you know, you've been in that situation quite a bit of times where you get the good start, but then when somebody passes you, it throws you out of sorts. And that's exactly what happened with Hunter Lawrence. He wasn't sprinting, and instead he tailed Ken Roczen. And I could kind of understand that, because what Hunter was doing, I could kind of see him try to pass Roczen early, or I'm sorry, not early, but in the closing stages, kind of like what we saw Stewart do to Carmichael in 2006 at San Diego. Now, how many of you remember that? I know I do. So I could kind of see Hunter doing something like that. But honestly, in this day and age, I think waiting for that those days are just about done. And to be honest, I do think that Hunter should have attacked right away and not wasted any time, or at least take a stab or two at Ken Roczen and make him think about it. Because if he did that, I guarantee you that Ken Roczen would not be your champion. I'm going to say that right now. Instead, the win went to Chase Sexton, and to be frank, that's great for him. If he can go into outdoors with that kind of momentum, assuming he stays at Kawasaki, I think Sexton can kind of turn his season around and save himself from career suicide like what Cooksey was talking about. And to be honest, the way that Sexton's been riding, I agree with what Rick Johnson said, that Sexton's got to be professional and just continue to ride the bike. Don't expect results so quickly, or even immediately for that matter. Because if you're a guy who expects those kinds of results right away, and when they don't happen, that can kind of damage your ego to a point where you're looking for a new team again. And like Cooksey said, that's career suicide. Because frankly, if I'm Chase Sexton right now, I'm sticking with Kawasaki and try to let the results come to me. Now, it's one thing if your team personnel just doesn't honor what you want, and that's kind of what Dan Fahey is doing, supposedly, of course, and I say that boldly, supposedly. Now, don't quote me on that. Because really, if your team manager or team personnel isn't listening to you, that's one thing. But it's another thing when you kind of have the kind of performances that Chase Sexton is having, and you're pretty vocal about it in the press conferences. And I'm not putting Chase Sexton under a bus right now, but I would like to see Sexton just suck it up, do your job. Or in a case of basketball or other sports, suck it up, do your job, trust your team. That's what you got to do if you're Chase Sexton. Do your job and trust your team, okay? Now, it's one thing if you're, like I said, it's one thing if your team manager or team personnel doesn't listen to you, but it's another thing when you're putting in the kind of performances like Sexton is, because he's a proven winner, he's a former champ, and he's done a lot better than what he has. Because, really, if he ends up going to Suzuki or Star Yamaha and has the kind of performances like this, Chase Sexton could very well be looking at retirement very early in his career. Now, this is the same kind of thing that happened with James Stewart, and he ended up committing career suicide as well when he got away from Yamaha and then went to Suzuki, and then when he tried to keep coming back after his crash at A1 in 2016, that was pretty much the beginning of the end for him. And instead of letting results come to him, he kept going for wins. And frankly, that is not what you want to do if you're trying to get back into the swing of things. Because Chad Reed was never a guy to do something like that. He always tried to let the results come to him, and that's why I think Chad had a more proper career than James Stewart. Because Chad Reed kept coming back season after season, and the only wrong turn I saw with Chad Reed was that whole camera deal where GoPro had bought all the rights, and Chad Reed could only run the camera in that new camera in the pits. And to be frank, I really thought that was the beginning of the end for Chad Reed's team. And to be honest, I also thought that Chad Reed might get a Supercross-only deal because it was his team. And to be honest, I thought that was theoretically his call, and he could run Supercross-only while Josh Grant did both seasons in 2015. But unfortunately, logic ain't what it used to be. Now, the one thing about getting back to this season, now I have in my banner that this is Suzuki's first title since 2010. Now, if you're on the broadcast team, you have to be more educated with the history of the sport. Now, Lee Diffie, I like the guy. Make no mistake. I think he does a pretty good job calling the races, even though some people say that he's better in car racing or whatnot, and they're not wrong. But I still like I still like Lee Diffie as the announcer, but honestly, Ricky can do a better job. And the way that he's doing right now is why I think getting rid of Jeff Emig was a dick move all around, for sure. And to be frank, if you're an announcer on this, you got to be well educated with the history of the sport. And to be frank, I was a little bit surprised that they did not mention the last time Suzuki won a championship, because it was Ryan Dungey in 2010. Now, it's one thing if you don't remember or don't exactly know, but seriously, you gotta, but still, at the same time, you gotta know these things. Because if I was on the broadcast team, I would have brought that up in a heartbeat, saying that was Suzuki's first title since 2010. Because after that, it was Villopoto from 2011 to 14, Dungey from 2015 to 17, then Jason Anderson in 2018. 2019, I believe, was, I think, Zach Osborne. I'm not quite sure. Or no, I'm sorry. It was Cooper Webb, because Osborne titled in 2020 in the outdoors. Cooper Webb in 2019, Eli Tomac in 2020, Cooper Webb titled again in 21, Tomac again in 22, then Sexton, Jet Lawrence, and Cooper Webb for a third time in 2025. And obviously, Cooper Webb was on Yamaha at that time. Sexton was on Honda. Jet Lawrence was on Honda, of course, and he's still there. So, and of course, Cooper Webb in 2021 was for KTM, and Tomac was for Kawasaki. But frankly, if you're on the broadcast team, that's something you ought to know, because you want to let the new viewers know the last time that this particular brand won a title. And I knew that for sure, because 2010 was the year of Ryan Dungey, that's for sure, because he won both the Supercross and Motocross titles in the same year. But at that time, I also thought that Ryan Dungey got way too spoiled back then, and 2011 was solid proof that he did, in my book, because he didn't deal with the competition. But here, Ken Roczen proved that as the season went on, the story goes, as the season went on, Roczen got worse and worse and worse, and he was fading towards the end. And I kept saying that Roczen had to talk to someone like Mike LaRocco, who got stronger as the races went on. But he really proved me wrong, and I couldn't be happier that he did the way that he did. But still, for Ken Roczen, congratulations on the title. I'm happy for you. But I'm also happy that Hunter Lawrence took it in stride took that loss in stride the way that he did. Because to be honest, I didn't know how Hunter was going to react to that, but he handled it like a pro, and that's what you want to see. Because if you're handling it the way that you do, like, oh, he won it, whatever, or kind of like saying a lot of bad stuff, that's not a good thing for your image for sure. And to be honest, I probably would have done the same thing if I was Hunter Lawrence. I would have handled it the way that he did. But honestly, the way these people are handling it now is a lot more professional than someone like Jason Lawrence would have done for sure back in the day. Because once they win a title, they let it go to their heads, and if you're that wrong kind of person. But still, before I wrap this up, Jorge Prado, what a ride for him. But at the same time, I also couldn't believe that he was given another asinine penalty of 1 license point for an inappropriate gesture to Cooper Webb. Now, for Cooper Webb to do the finger gun like that over the finish line jump, he used the index finger. But although it was kind of cut and dry, And that's a penalty that on one side of the coin I could understand because it was the middle finger. But still, to penalize Jorge Prado for something like that, you cannot be making up these kinds of penalties because that's like changing the rules of the game. Because to be honest, that's like watching a boxing match and none of the fighters are allowed to throw a punch. Okay? Now, I'm all for a little trash talk, but there's a fine line and you don't want to cross it. That's for sure. But did Prado cross the line? I'm going to say no. Because really, you cannot make up asinine penalties like that and expect to get away with it. How do you sleep at night? So those AMA people, how do you sleep at night? That's what I'd like to know. How in God's name do you sleep at night making up these stupid penalties like that and showing so much inconsistency? Because it's pretty clear that you don't know good racing on the track if it walked up and said hi. And that's where I'll leave it. So, anyway, guys, that's all for this season. That's all for this video, too. And remember, subscribe. I'm going to try to do a little better outdoors with getting these recaps out of the way quickly. And, of course, I also have to balance my life as well. And I'll try not to show so much laziness. I will do my recap of UH softball soon, and I can't wait to do that one. So, thanks, guys. Subscribe, and I'll see you all outdoors.